All right, and I see our attendance kind of plateauing here, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to this month's webinar from Hatch Early Learning on fostering a positive classroom community. We'll start with a little housekeeping today, some introductions, and then we have a ton of content for you, so we're going to dig right in. I'll start by introducing myself. My name's Kylie Rymanowicz, and I am the content manager for Hatch Early Learning. I help develop the content that goes into all three of our products. I'm really excited to be here today with one of our amazing trainers, Cristina, and I'll let Cristina introduce herself.
Hi, Kylie, how are you? And hi, everyone. I am in Miami, Florida, so it's pretty hot here. So I do miss a little bit the cold weather. My name is Cristina Caro, and I'm a class consultant. I work for the early office of Head Start as a federal reviewer. I'm also work for TeachTome as a class consultant, and everything I do in my life is around class. So I love the tool, and I really want to say thank you to Kylie for inviting me today, and I'm looking forward to talking to you in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. So today we have kind of three main topics of conversation. We're going to talk about the importance of community. We're going to talk about building a positive community in the classroom. And then we're going to talk about building positive classroom community with Ignite and with class. Cristina mentioned she is our resident class expert. So she is going to take this part of the presentation. She's going to tell you all about class and some really interesting ideas to think about when using digital tools in your classroom, and also thinking about fostering that positive classroom environment. Like I said, we have a ton of content, so we are going to get rolling. You might see a message in the chat box introducing myself and Maria. If you have questions or comments or things to share, please feel free to type those in the chat box at any time. You don't have to wait for questions and answers at the end. We'll do our best to answer those as we go, but if we miss any important questions, we'll have a little bit of time at the end to answer those as well. So feel free to type those in whenever you want. And we'll also have some opportunities for discussion. So we'll ask you some questions and you can respond in the chat box or in the Q&A box as well. So let's start today by talking about community and why community is so important. We're going to start with a discussion question. So my question for you is, what is community and what does community feel like? So what I'd like you to do is think of your answer, type that into the chat box and submit that for us. What do you think community is and what does community feel like? I can tell you that for me, I think of community like that perfect warm sweater in the winter. Like I have a lot of sensory stuff going on as an adult. Like I can only wear certain fibers, certain textures, like some things really bother me, but that perfect sweater, it's warm, it's not itchy. Your skin is covered, you feel warm, you feel comforted, maybe you feel a little bit of elastic in there that kind of like gives you that warm hug. Community makes me feel like I can breathe, I'm safe. We have some great answers coming in here. Community is connecting with others around me, being around and connecting with other people. Community feels like home, Maggie says. Yeah, community feels like that safe place. I have certain people in my life that are part of my community, and the way I describe being around them is like that feeling of exhaling when you don't realize you've been holding your breath, like when you're really stressed about something and you're kind of tense, and then you just let yourself take a deep breath and exhale, and you're like, oh gosh, that feels really good. Like the kind of people you can just feel really safe around, they feel like home. Yeah. So when we're defining community in this presentation, we kind of have two definitions. Community is a feeling, but it's also a set of relationships. Community can be complex. So humans form and maintain community connections to meet common needs. The members of a community feel things like trust, belonging, safety, and care for one another, as well as this overarching feeling that they can influence their environment and each other. So a family can be a form of community. Your coworkers can be a form of community. Maybe you're part of a religious or a spiritual group that's also a part of a community for you. Yeah, Kathy's saying being part of a community is healthier. I totally agree that having positive community can really impact not just our physical health, but also our mental health as well. I think that's something we saw in the beginning of the pandemic when the way that we traditionally engaged in communities had to sort of stop quickly. And we had to think about, we experienced the effects of that physically and mentally. And then we had to figure out new ways to form communities, right? Thank you so much for sharing that. The feeling of community that we've been talking about is really formed from a lot of shared experiences. We're going to talk about how the importance of community relates to early childhood theory and development for just a minute here. And then we're going to specifically get into some ways that we can work on building a positive community in early childhood settings. So you might be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is one of my favorite early childhood theories to talk about because I think it's so interesting. But basically, this guy named Abraham Maslow developed one of the best known theories of motivation. He posited that human actions are motivated by certain physiological and psychological needs, and he organized these needs into this little pyramid that you see on the screen here. He put the most basic needs at the bottom and the more complex needs towards the top of the pyramid. So we'll go through them super briefly. I promise there will not be a theory quiz at the end of this class, but you can see at the bottom, we have our basic physical needs to survive: water, food, breathing, shelter, clothing. Next, we've got safety and security needs: health and wellness, physical safety, financial security. Then we have social needs: love, acceptance, belonging. I'm going to put a giant star next to social needs because this is really where community starts to play in. Community is how we get some of these social needs met. Then there's esteem needs, so appreciation, respect, feeling accomplished. And that leads us to the point of our pyramid, or self-actualization, which is personal growth and fulfilling one's potential. So the way this hierarchy is set up, we can only move up to more complex needs once those more basic needs are met. So once we have our physiological needs met for survival, then we can start working on meeting those safety and security needs and so on and so forth. As an early childhood community, we need to help children meet these critical needs at the bottom of this pyramid, right? That allows them to move up. A child's school community can influence how their basic and more complex needs are met. So community really matters in helping children accomplish and being able to move up this ladder of development here. We've got one more theory to talk about, and it's the ecological systems theory. You might remember this from an early childhood theory class, maybe you took in getting a degree, or you took just learning in professional development, learning about how children develop. But the ecological systems theory was developed by Yuri Bronfenbrenner, who's a psychologist. And basically, he proposed this theory that children, people, humans in general, are influenced by our environments, right? So he proposed 5 systems: the microsystem, the mesosystem, the exosystem, the macrosystem, and the chronosystem, and said that each of these systems are interrelated and they influence a child's development. So a child's development depends on their relationships with all of these other systems. I'll give you some more detail. The microsystem is things in a child's direct environment. So parents, siblings, teachers, peers, people they interact with on a daily basis directly. The mesosystem is interactions between their microsystems. So for example, how their childcare provider interacts with their parent. So they interact with both of these groups directly, but how these two groups interact with each other, that's part of that mesosystem. So if a childcare provider and a parent are having really negative interactions, that impacts a child's development. Then we've got the exosystem. So this is formal and informal social structures that don't directly impact the child, but influences their development. So like a neighborhood, the parent's workplace, parents' friends, or the media, something bigger. And then we've got the macro system. This is really culture. So cultural elements, not cultural elephants, that impact a child's development, like socioeconomic status, wealth, poverty, ethnicity. And then the chronosystem refers to environmental changes that happen over time. If we pay specific attention to the micro and mesosystems, like a child's school environment and culture can directly impact their environment. So how families participate in and are part of a child's school culture also impacts their development. So we know that childcare, early childhood settings, and the culture that's created there impact a child's ability to meet their needs and influence how they develop. So let's think for a moment about the impact of a positive school community. In a positive school community, a child can say the following things. I feel safe. I feel like I belong. I feel seen and heard as a person, as an individual, and I feel important. And if I hadn't started any introduction to this presentation and I just asked you, what do you want children to feel like in your classroom? I guarantee you would have said some sort of mix of these things, right? We want children to feel safe. We want them to feel like they belong, that this is a home. This is a place where they can relax. We want them to feel like they're seen and they're heard, not just that they're getting their basic needs met, but when I'm having an emotional moment, when I'm having an emotional problem, do I feel like somebody cares, that somebody says my feelings matter, they're important. And we want them to feel like they are important. You know, I used to do, one way I used to do this in my classroom was if a child was out sick for a couple of days, when they come back and you say, gosh, Daniel, we really missed you when you were gone. We noticed you weren't here. And we really missed being able to play with you. That stuff like that makes a child feel like, wow, I'm really important. I matter here. So how do we build a positive community? It's really easy to say, a little bit harder to do, but I can also guarantee that you're already doing many of these things in your classroom because you love and care about the children that you're working with. So we're going to talk about each of these things in much more detail, but I want to give you a roadmap of where we're going here. We're going to talk about building relationships and trust, encouraging autonomy, creating positive classroom routines, supporting family engagement, and responding appropriately to child behavior. Let's start by talking about building relationships and trust. And we're going to do that by talking about the 5 facets of trust: benevolence, reliability, competence, honesty, and openness. So when we're talking about benevolence, we mean caring for other people, creating a sense of belonging, and centering children and families. So caring for others, we know that as child care providers and early childhood professionals, part of your job is caring for the basic needs of the children in your care, making sure that they are drinking water and eating food. Do they have shelter when it starts to rain or snow? Are they dressed appropriately for the weather when you go outside? Are they able to toilet and use the bathroom when they need to, right? We're meeting their basic needs, but we're talking about caring for others. So when a child trips and they scrape their knee, how are we caring for them in that moment? When we're talking about creating a sense of belonging, we want to make sure that children feel like they are at home in their classroom environment, that they have a space there, that everyone is making space for them to be there and be themselves. And then we're also talking about centering children and their families. So what we do in an early childhood classroom, we know that we have a lot of policies and procedures to follow. We have curriculum that we have to implement. But at the core of all of that, we don't want to get stuck in the fine print. At the core of that, we really want to center children and their families. So this is classic early childhood, but I'm sure you've been there where you've planned a really great lesson. You worked it out. You got all the materials really ready. You got your kids to a small group table, and then something happened. And you thought, gosh, I really should stick with my plan. I have to do this activity. I have to assess this skill. But maybe your kids are telling you today is not the day. Like, we have something else more important. When I taught preschool, we had a guinea pig lovingly named Fluffy Muffin. You might guess that the children did vote, and 2 names tied, Fluffy and Muffin. So Fluffy Muffin was born. And one day Fluffy Muffin passed away. And all of our lessons that day went out the window because we had to center children that day and center this experience of grief that they were having. So benevolence is caring for others, making sure people feel like they belong, and centering children and families. Reliability is another way that we build trust. We can do that by being consistent and dependable. So this is true for your interactions with children, but also your interactions with parents, because it's really important that parents build that trust in you as well. So do you do the things you say you're going to do? If you know that you're supposed to send a weekly note home, is that done? Is it done at the same day every week? If you know a child is going to be out for a week and you've shared with a parent, you're going to do X, Y, and Z to help them prepare for a week of vacation or a road trip. Have you done that? So being consistent and dependable with your care for children, but also with your interactions with families. Reliability also includes rooting expectations and goals in shared values. So what are the shared values of your classroom, your center, or your school? And then what are the shared values between that classroom, center, or school and families as well? And then we can also do this by demonstrating a predictable pattern of behavior. Do children and families feel like they have a pretty good sense of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and when you're going to do it? Like I said, if we do notes home every Friday, a parent wants to be able to predict, like, okay, there's going to be a note in my mailbox today that tells me exactly how my child is doing or gives me an update, or there's going to be an email in my inbox, or I know that when my child is having a really hard day, my teacher's going to send me an email or send me a note through our app to let me know that he's kind of having a rough day today and I might need to give him some extra love tonight, right? So those are the three things that can help build reliability. I see a question came in about receiving the presentation slides. You will receive those after the presentation, kind of in the follow-up information. So I forgot to mention at the beginning, but thank you for sharing that, Alejandra. You don't have to worry about taking lots of notes because you'll get the slides after the presentation is over. So another way that we build trust is competence. So demonstrating necessary knowledge and skills. Am I doing what I need to do? Do I know about child development? Do I know about positive discipline? Do I know about the curriculum I'm supposed to be teaching? One of the ways you do that is by attending professional development like this one. We show competence by providing resources and support. So when a parent comes to you and says, hey, I'm really worried about my child's speech. They're not saying as many words as, you know, my other kids did at that age, and I'm worried they're falling behind. Do we provide resources and support? Do we say, okay, I know exactly who to call for you to get a free developmental assessment, and here are some things I can try in the classroom to see if we can get him to say a few more words. And then authenticity. Do they feel like you're being your real self? Do they feel like you're a real person, or do they feel like maybe you're kind of putting on a little bit of a show or not being super authentic? And then we have honesty. So honesty is acting with integrity, matching actions to words, and taking responsibility for actions. So I feel like we all understand what honesty is, but we also know what it feels like when somebody is living that value of honesty. Somebody we know, like, okay, I trust what you're doing. I know that if you make a mistake or something goes wrong, you're going to tell me about it. And what you're saying is matching what you're doing. And then we have openness. This is our last facet of trust, but this is sharing information openly, listening carefully, and sharing decision-making. I can tell you about a weird example when I taught preschool, but I had this little boy in my class named Jonathan, who was super sweet. And one day I was cleaning up after nap time, so I was wiping down all of the mats and picking them up and putting them on the hooks that they needed to be on. And I happened to bend over to pick up a mat, and my foot came out behind my body, and he happened to be standing there, and my foot touched his belly. I didn't kick him, he wasn't hurt, but he looked at me and he said, "You kicked me." And I thought, oh no, he's gonna go home and tell his mom I kicked him, but I didn't. But as soon as his mom came for pickup, I said, oh, okay, I have a story to tell you. I want to be open about this thing that happened. I want to be open about my point of view of what happened, what you might hear from Jonathan. We had a nice little laugh about it. She knew that I didn't harm him. She knew that he wasn't hurt, but I shared that information openly, like, oops, we had kind of a whoopsie moment today. A weird thing happened. I want to be really open about it so that you know I'm not trying to hide something from you. Openness is also listening carefully. Sometimes we listen, but we don't really listen. So it's listening to understand, not listening to respond, is really important. And then we do this also by sharing decision-making. I had a preschooler once who had a really hard time potty training at school. He could do it at home. He spent the summer at home, completely in underwear, completely potty trained. And when he came back, he just like insisted on wearing a diaper. And instead of me saying, here's what we're gonna do A, B, C, and D, Mom and I had a phone call and we shared decision-making. I said, okay, here's my suggestion of something we should try. What are your thoughts? What do you think? And she said, well, maybe we don't start there. Maybe we start somewhere else. And we came to an agreement in the middle. And then we continued to communicate throughout the process until he was fully in underwear at school and on his way. But I didn't decide what was best for him and his family in that situation. We really shared that decision-making. So that's building trust in relationships. Next, we're going to talk about encouraging autonomy, control, feeling like you have some independence. This is really important for children. But I want to ask you, why is autonomy important for children? And or how does autonomy make them feel? Feel free to type your responses in the chat box. Why is autonomy important for children, and what does that make them feel? What is it like to feel autonomy when you're a young child? Give you a few minutes to type in those responses. I know it can take a while to type in, especially if you're on a mobile device or a tablet. It's a little slower to type, so I'll give you a minute to respond there. Autonomy helps children feel valued. Absolutely. It also helps them feel like you trust them, right? And you've probably had this experience in a workplace or maybe with a family event. Thanksgiving is a really big deal in my family, and my mom is like the general of Thanksgiving. She hosts it every year. And the year that she was like, Kylie, I think you can handle the gravy this year, I was like, oh, okay. It's a lot of responsibility, but like, she believes in me. She thinks I can do it by myself. This is something that's so important to her. And so I feel like I'm really valued because she's giving me this responsibility, right? Yes, people are saying autonomy helps children feel responsible, helps them feel loved and understood. And we know the one thing small children want is to do things themselves, right? I swear, like, I do it might be the first 3-word phrase like every child says. I do it. It makes them feel special. Absolutely, Felicity. So when we're talking about autonomy in the classroom, it's giving children the freedom to explore, to try new things, and the freedom to make mistakes, because we know that with increasing independence comes increased opportunities for children to learn by not making the right decision the first time or making some mistakes. Those mistakes are a critical part of learning and one that we don't want to ignore just because they might be a little inconvenient for us. You can give children autonomy in the classroom in regards to the curriculum. So does your curriculum allow for opportunities for children to do free play? Are your activities so structured that children don't really get control? So if you're doing a small group activity, is it you have to do steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 exactly how I say them? Or is it, here we have a material, here's our theme, here's our idea. Why don't you explore a little bit and try, make some decisions, learn from some mistakes? You know, having those opportunities for autonomy woven through our curriculum is really an important opportunity for children to practice that skill and to feel valued, right? When children feel like they have some control, they want to come back and play the next day. You can also weave autonomy into your schedule. So do you have opportunities for children to make decisions within reason about what they do during the day? Do you have that free play time? During outside time, are they able to do whatever they want, or do you have a bunch of structured activities set up? And then you can also think about the physical space. So to set children up for success, we want to create a physical space that they can be successful in. So do they have access to lots of materials within reason and safety, right? We don't leave power tools out for them to play with or find, but do they have materials that they can access on their own without asking for help in order to create their own play and their own games during the day? Your job is to really guide children while also giving them the freedom to make some decisions and exercise some of that independence. So that's autonomy. Next, we're going to talk about creating positive classroom routines. We're going to talk about these quickly, but CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or called CASEL, has identified kind of 3 signature practices that help support social emotional learning in a classroom and help build a sense of community. They are welcoming inclusion activity, routine, or ritual, engaging strategies, and an optimistic closure. We're going to dig into each of these in a little bit more detail. Welcoming and inclusion activities are probably something that you're already doing, but they're so important. So starting each day with an activity, a routine, or a ritual that builds community and connects to the work ahead. So do you high five each kid on the way in? In Montessori early childhood classrooms, they do handshakes. So every morning we do the same ritual that makes us feel connected. So we want children to feel included, connected, and like they belong. So smiling warmly and calling children by their preferred name. Whole group meetings. In my classroom, we had welcome circle every morning, and we would sing a song about their names, and we would talk about our schedule for the day, things like that. So the goal of this activity is to create an environment that supports inclusion, belonging, and connection. We want children to feel like their voices are heard, and that is a really important routine to help children feel connected in your classroom. And then we've got developing engaging strategies. So engaging strategies offer many opportunities that vary in complexity to practice social emotional learning skills, but also create that community for children. So allowing children to engage individually or collectively in groups with some intentionally chosen strategies and sequence steps that suits your group's goals or needs for children. We can build kind of a balance of activities. So examples are private time to process. I'm a processor, so if you give me new information, I need quiet time to reflect about it before I can talk about it. So recognizing that some children might need some quiet time to reflect, to think, to work through a problem, but also maybe you're pairing children up for activities. Maybe you're doing a lot of small group activities, including a variety of different and varying learning strategies. So with early childhood in particular, you need a lot of physical learning. So I'm a kinesthetic learner myself. I like to go and do things and move my body if I'm learning something new. So maybe instead of just singing a letter song, maybe you're passing a beanbag to each other as you're singing a letter song. So children who need that physical input, physical activity can help learn through that experience as well. And then we've got optimistic closure. This is not necessarily like a cheery ending, but kind of like highlighting and talking about your shared experience with children. So maybe it's in my classroom, I worked in a high school classroom, and we do plan, do, review. So plan, children talk about what they're going to do during choice time. Do, they go do it. Review was kind of our optimistic closure. We'd get back together and we'd say, here was your plan for the day. What did you do? Tell me about it. So we're getting back together. We're helping children feel connected and ready to keep learning. We're reflecting what they were doing. Maybe it's, what are you looking forward to over the weekend? Maybe that's the question that we ask. Maybe it's asking children something they want to learn more about after you've done a science experiment, talking about dinosaurs, let's say. What more do you want to learn about dinosaurs? So the goal is to kind of leave your group on a positive note where children feel connected and ready to come back and learn the next day or later in the day. Next up, we have supporting family engagement, and this one is so important to building a classroom community. So it's not just what you're doing in your classroom with children, but families have a huge part in building a strong and positive classroom community for young children. So these are the 5 R's of family engagement: respect, reassurance and responsiveness, relationships, reciprocity, and reflect or reflection. So let's talk about these. One of the most important ways we support family engagement is to offer families respect. Families want to be respected as an important part of their child's life and learning, and they want to see their beliefs, their culture, their values, and their home experiences honored and respected at their school. So we can do that by listening to families, truly listening, absorbing what they're saying, by maintaining constant communication, and that can be in varying forms. It could be a chat at drop off or pickup. It could be through an app, through an email, through posting on social media, a phone call if needed, or a conference or a meeting in person if needed. And then we can also involve families in the classroom, invite families in. Now that we're sort of on the other end of COVID, I don't want to say COVID is over because it's not, but you might have the opportunity to invite families back into your classroom in some capacity. In my classroom, we would do things like the mystery reader, where we would schedule one parent to come in and read a book during story time, and we would not tell the kids which parent it was. It was a mystery of the day, and they got to guess all day. And then, or we had parents come in and share a skill. So we had a parent come in and play the flute because she played the flute. But involving families in classroom activities is a great way to build that respect. And then we've got reassurance and responsiveness. To do this, you can document. Take photos and videos so families know what's going on during their child's day, what they enjoy doing, how they're learning. You can provide regular updates. Again, those can be daily, weekly, monthly, newsletters, however you do that in your classroom, but having multiple ways of providing updates to families. And by responding to families' messages as quickly as possible, that helps families feel reassured, like, okay, I know that if I have a question or concern, they're going to take it seriously and they're going to respond to me. Then we've got relationships. Oh, I've double clicked here. Building relationships with families is crucial. You can do this by greeting families, inviting families into your classroom, which is one we mentioned earlier, but is also important for relationships, and making family feedback easy. Do you have a way for families to share feedback about how they think things are going for their child or in the classroom? And then once you receive that feedback, what are you doing with it? You know, we had a parent in our classroom who was really concerned about us celebrating Christmas. And we didn't celebrate Christmas in our classroom. That was not something that we did because we had children from lots of diverse ethnic and religious backgrounds in our classroom. But she was so concerned about it, and her family was Jewish, and she asked, she said, could I come in and talk about Yom Kippur? Could I talk about a holiday that we celebrate? And we said, sure. And so she came in and she talked about the holiday and explained to the children what it was, because she was really worried that in many school settings, children were only getting experience or information about one religion's holiday. So we heard her feedback and we offered an opportunity to have her come into the classroom and share her experiences with the children and share her family's culture as well. Then we've got reciprocity. You can engage in reciprocity with families by dialoguing with families, utilizing two-way communication. So instead of telling them what you're doing, ask them about their goals for their child or their concerns or expectations, and then come up with a plan together for how to address that. It's also really important to consider culture, language, and literacy. So we have to pay attention to the cultural expectations and norms of families. We need to pay attention to their language. So if their primary language is Spanish and I don't speak Spanish, do we need to do something about that? In order for us to communicate effectively, do we need to have somebody involved who can help translate and make sure that we're communicating effectively and appropriately? And then thinking about literacy skills. Are you only sharing updates in writing with families that potentially have low literacy skills and maybe aren't able to fully engage with those updates? So making accommodations as necessary, altering your plans to make sure that you're really connecting with families is really important. And finally, we have reflection. So this is when you ask yourself, how well do I know my families? And do I know the children that I'm caring for? How can I learn more about them? We can ask families, how do you want to be involved in the classroom? How do you feel about how we're communicating and interacting? Do you feel like you need more communication from me? Less? Do you need me to communicate differently? And we can also ask peers. So asking teachers in your classroom, teachers in your school, administrators that you're working with, how are you engaging with families? What's working really well for you? What do you think I could try to make sure that families feel really engaged in my classroom environment? And then we've got another way to help build positive classroom community here, which is responding appropriately to child behavior. So we can do this really through three foundational steps: setting and teaching clear expectations, responding appropriately to children, and using data to inform decisions about child behavior. So when we're setting expectations with children, you know this already, but we need to identify the expectations and be specific, right? If I say we don't run in the classroom, it's okay, but maybe I'm going to be really specific. Like, we use walking feet in our classroom to make sure everybody stays safe, right? When a child is running with scissors, we don't want to just say, don't run. We want to tell them, why is running with scissors unsafe? We want to provide examples for them. We can also respond appropriately to child behaviors. So we want to acknowledge appropriate behavior. My catchphrase here is, what you pay attention to, you get more of. So you want to try to catch kids being good. It's really easy to catch them not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But think about it this way: catch them being good, like, I got you. You're being a really good friend. Acknowledge that appropriate behavior. And then we want to respond to challenging behavior. So we do have to acknowledge it. We want to talk about it with children. We want to talk about why it's not appropriate. And then we want to talk about how do we do different or do better next time. And then we can use data to inform our decisions. So once you have appropriate responses to child behavior, you can use this data. So if you notice that Michael always shows challenging behaviors during morning circle time, when it's time to transition from his turn to another child's turn. Once you think, okay, that's my data, every day this seems to happen, you can use it to make changes to your classroom, your routine, and your interaction. So maybe you sit next to Michael during circle time to help him through that transition that he's really struggling with, for example. So to build positive community, we want to center relationships that build trust, to support autonomy and independence, to create positive classroom routines, to support family engagement, and to respond appropriately to child behavior. I've mentioned a few times that you're probably doing lots of these things already. And the reason that we're talking about things you might already know is that when we put them all together with intention, you can sort of see the connection between what you're doing every day and how that's working to build a classroom community that supports a child's development and is going to help them learn all the important skills that they need for school and for life, and also make them feel like they're important and valued. And that's really our ultimate goal in early childhood education. So here's our little checklist for building a positive community. What do you do to build trust with children and families, to help children experience autonomy, to establish positive classroom routines, to engage families, and to effectively manage children's behavior? You don't have to type in your answers to this, but this is what I want you to reflect on once you get these PowerPoint slides after the presentation. Think about this checklist, maybe write a few things down, and maybe you've got an area where you've got some room to grow and you can try incorporating some new ideas into your classroom or your routine that will help you build a positive community for your children. So we're going to transition a little bit now and talk about Ignite and class. So I'm going to kick it over to Maria Cristina, and she's going to tell us all about class and how Ignite and class kind of connect.
Awesome. Thank you, Kylie. I was like you are a great presenter. And let me tell you that I didn't even, I don't think I was blinking so many times. I was so into super engaging. So thank you for that. It is awesome. I wanted to talk to you about class. A lot of you are familiar with class, but let me just go over what class is, just in case. So the Classroom Assessment Scoring System, or CLASS, is an observation tool that focuses on the effectiveness of classroom interactions. And I know we already talked about, building the positive community, but think about the interactions we have in every day with the children that we work with, the parents, with our colleagues in our building or in our agency. It's so important, the hows. So when Teachstone created the class tool, they focus on the how. How are these interactions happening in our classroom? And it is so important, the way that we make other fields, right? Think about for a second about your favorite teacher. You probably remember somebody in your life. You might not remember their name, but you remember how that person made you feel, right? When they talk to you, how they tend to you, when you had a problem, you felt like that person was there, connected, like almost like your security blanket. This is the person I can go to when I'm feeling sad, when I'm feeling excited. She's going to listen. She's going to pay attention to me. And that's what class is all about. We're not looking for perfection because nobody's perfect, right? We might look close to perfect, yeah, in our good days, but there's no perfection out there. So we're looking for being effective. So, and if we think about the classroom interactions, these daily interactions promote children's social and cognitive development. Children thrive when teachers create these nurturing, well-managed settings and provide the frequent and engaging opportunities to learn. Right. And today we're going to make that connection because, and let me just kind of look at my notes because I have some notes here. The digital games can also support these amazing interactions that we have with children. Right. Think about when we interacting with them. How are you presenting you just got the software, for example, uploaded in your computer, or you're using the tablets. How are you presenting those games for children or the new software? Are you enthusiastic about it? And if we're thinking about emotional support, for example, emotional support for class refers to specific teaching behaviors that help children develop warm, supportive relationships, experience, enjoy in being happy to be there, happy to be together, and enjoy learning. So how are we presenting that to children? So if we think about the emotional support, and later we're going to talk about, well, not later, in a few minutes, we'll talk about, we're going to focus on positive climate and language modeling for today. But if we think about class and HASH, we can almost align all of those dimensions. And going back to emotional support, the positive climate really refers to that, what is the teacher doing to promote positive interactions in the classroom? And what is the most important thing that we need to do as teachers? I remember I'm kind of old, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I started teaching back in 1980. And I always noticed that my body language was so important because I have the tendency to speak with my hands, and it can be a little bit intimidating for children. So, when I'm creating these relationships, I want to make sure that I read the classroom and read those children, and every child is unique. And my community in my classroom is going to be completely different to Miss Kylie's and Kayla's classroom, right? So I need to get to know my children, invest time getting to know them. How will I get to do that? By devoting time, talking to them. And if we're going back now to Hatch, when we're presenting this awesome, and I forgot to mention, but I also work for Hatch. I facilitate some of the training. So I am a very lucky person because I love what I do. And I love this software because it really helps. It was created to help teachers to gather that data so we can be more intentional. And when we're thinking about class, that's what we're doing. When we're observing classrooms using this class tool, we're gathering data to help the teacher grow, to tell them this is what you're doing awesome, and this is where you can become more intentional. So if you're thinking about when we're using the HASH software, we can be the way that we present, the software in the classroom. What kind of questions can we ask the children? Remember, if you're excited about it, they're going to be excited about it. You can ask them questions about what were you doing? What game did you play? What adventure? What are some of the digital adventures that you went to today? Who do you meet? Which of the HASH characters is your favorite one? And sit with them, and create that, make sure that they know that you are into the game as well as they are. And that is going to make a big difference, because I have observed classrooms where a lot of teachers tell me, guess what? We have the HASH, but my kids are not using it. And then sometimes I tell them, okay, how about give it a try now that I'm observing your class and see what happens when I'm coaching teachers, because they talked about HASH all the time, because I coach a lot of teachers from Head Start centers, and I provide, consulting services and things like that. And they ask me, so what is happening? Why my kids are not so engaged in the software? And then after observing how she's engaged, we noticed, and immediately I'm like, we're modeling. Children learn in the context of the interactions they're having with the adults. So everything that we do, you are modeling for them. So if I'm not sitting and playing and I'm excited about anything in my classroom, guess what? Chances are they're not going to be excited and sitting down and engaged in that, in that software or in that activity, because it's us. We are modeling those behaviors. So let that sink in once again. Remember, and I know that you know this because we are all professionals in this field of the early childhood education, but children learn in the context of the relationships, the interactions that they have with the adults in their lives. And 90% of the brain develops when? The first 5 years. So imagine all those connections we're helping them build. So it's up to us. So if we want them to say thank you, please, and thank you, to do things in our classroom, we need to model those behaviors for them as well. And we're going to talk about language modeling in a second. So maybe we can move to the next slide. Thank you. So let's focus on positive climate and language modeling, how these two dimensions tie with the HASH software. So let's think about positive climate. What is positive climate? When we're thinking about positive climate, we're thinking is how is the teacher creating those relationships? How are you modeling relationships so you can create that warm sense of the emotional connection that we want children to have with us? And very important, going back now to your body language. When we're using the class tool, we're actually observing the body language. So if you tell me I am very happy in my job, but you just smile throughout the day when you're interacting with children, what is the message you're sending them? So we actually, the positive affect is very important in our classroom, especially when we're working with children. We're teaching them about emotions. And this is me. I'm happy to be here. And I'm going to say, welcome, today's Monday. Way, I'm so excited to be back to school and whatever we're going to say next, right? But that is actually evident that we are happy with them. We are happy and we're sending the message to them. My teacher is excited to see me. Wow, what a concept, right? So I'm feeling, and all those feelings that Kylie was talking was talking about early, the feeling that you belong in that classroom. You know that somebody missed you, making you feel special. Some of the comments that you made early, you know, that is class, the positive climate that we want to create, positive communication. Wow, you did a great job. You did, you know, you went into an adventure, you joined, you know, the hash, let's see, I'm thinking about which character, because I love them all, but I'm thinking of Lila, right? The monkey, remember the monkey? She is awesome. So, you know, talking about what happened in the adventure and engaging in this conversation, what a great opportunity to initiate, you know, conversations with children about what happened and how is this related to your life, and have you ever seen a monkey, and how, you know, where did she take you, and things like that. But before that happened, we also need to be familiar with the Hash software. So in my trainings, when I'm working for Hash, I usually tell teachers, remember, you need to know about the software, you know, get to play. You can log into the teacher portal and really get familiar with the adventures that children are going to be joining. It's so important that we are excited about that, because there's so much learning going on. Plus, you know, the software is collecting all this data for you, rich data, sending you those reports. So it, you know, it is awesome. So positive communication is important, letting them know when they're doing, and as Kylie mentioned early, being specific. I like how you're doing this, or you did a great job at this and this and that. So they know. And that is also going to help with behavior management in your classroom, because when we focus on the positive, more positive comes our way. It happens. All my teachers, the ones that I coach, they're coming back to me and they say, it really worked. That's what people are using in class in Florida, and it's part of our law. And it really works. If you focus on the positive, you're going to get more positive. Children at this age, they want to please you. And when you're the favorite teacher, guess what? They are going to want it. They always want to help you. They're going to be there for you. And the good days and the not so good days, they're going to be, teacher, you got this. And they're going to be supporting you all the time. Respect here also is very similar to what Kylie was talking about early. Respect means that the tone of voice that we use when we're talking to children. Do we use their names? Very important. We all have names, and I know some of the names are very hard to pronounce, but is my teacher making an effort to pronounce that name, right? Or is she going to call me, hey, buddy, come over here, hey, sweetheart, which are great words, but, you know, my name is, if you're at least making the attempt to use my name, that is a sign of respect. Respecting other cultures is very important. Respect also is saying please and thank you. So if it's time to clean up, if I tell John, can you please go and put the blocks on top of the basket, la, 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 that sounds great. Thank you, John, for doing that. Thank you for putting the blocks inside the basket or on top of the basket. Versus, it's time to clean up, put that over there, put that over here. And, you know, you need to move this way and move the other way. It's the how we do things, how we treat them, how that is what class is all about. The interactions, how is the teacher, because you're modeling those hows for children. How you treat them, they're going to treat others. The other day I was conducting an observation here in Miami, and I loved, I went outside. For pre-K, we don't observe playground interactions, but since they were in the playground, I decided, let me just go to the playground. It was a really nice day. I'm going to sit and just kind of chill here until they come back in the classroom and I can continue my observation. And one little girl, she fell down, and I saw like 10 of the other little girls, they came running, and the boys, and are you okay? They help her up, they like shake it, they make sure that she was okay. And I'm thinking, oh, that's so awesome. Guess what? Earlier, I saw the teacher acting the same way when somebody fell inside. So see how they capture the way that we react. They're learning from us, this compassion, this being a great person. They're learning that from the teacher that they're working with. Versus other class that I have observed, but I'm not going to say where I was, right? But somebody, fell down and the teacher goes, "You're okay, get up." Like not acknowledging their emotions, their feelings. For them, it's a big deal. For us, maybe you're thinking nothing happened. They're not bleeding, so they're fine. But they're not. It's a big deal. I fell down. My whole body went to the ground. I need you to support me, to acknowledge. All of that is part of that, positive climbing, building those relationships, building that trust that we want to have in our classroom. So we can talk about, and I know I'm going kind of fast, I think, right? So part of the relationship, some of the behaviors that we're looking for when we're talking about relationship in the class tool is the physical proximity. Is the teacher consistently close to the children when they're playing games, for example, when they're in the computer or they're using, our software, the Hash software? Is she close by? Is she involved? Is she going to maybe join in and sort of like show them, or just by sitting next to them and kind of being excited about what the adventures they're going when they're engaging in those digital experiences? That's important. Peer assistant, we might, sometimes we notice that in classroom. We want to see a lot of peer assistant because that's going to be evidence of what the teachers usually helping them. So when it's time, when somebody's in trouble or something happens, another child is usually going to come and help. Just like I told you earlier, that sample of seeing how they care about each other when they're in the playground. The match effort, match affect. Like when somebody's happy, the other person is also happy. If I'm excited, you're also excited. And engaging in those social conversations. So before we talk about, before I start talking about language modeling, I wanted to mention the social conversations here on Positive Climate. It's all about the teacher. How is the teacher engaging in conversations other than lessons, right? When you, going back to the Hash again, if the children are playing in the computer, the teacher can sit down and initiate these conversations. Do you like this game? What is your favorite part of it? Who's your favorite character? Where are you going? What is it that you did? Have you ever gone to the zoo because you're learning the letters in the zoo, or you're learning how to count fruits and vegetables? Where do you eat fruits and vegetables at home? Because here at lunchtime today, we're having a vegetable. Do you want to guess what vegetable we have? I can tell you it's green and it looks like a little tree. What do you think it could be? Really engaging in conversations with children. And because we are the adults in the classroom, we are the ones that are modeling all these behaviors. We need to initiate. We can't wait for children to initiate sometimes conversations, because maybe they might not have all the words to talk to us. And sometimes it's up to the adult in the classroom to okay, especially with the children that you notice that maybe they don't talk as much. You want to be the one that is exposing them to that language. And we'll talk more about that when I talk to you about language modeling. But we can move to the next one. Thank you. Thank you, Kylie.
Yeah, I noticed we're a little bit short on time, and I looked through the next couple of slides. It looks like you've covered a lot of this. Do you want to skip ahead to language modeling, and then they'll have the notes for these?
Yes, sure. And I'm sorry, I know I talk a lot as well, but language modeling is another, and I'm going to tell you that this dimension usually scores low, and a lot of low quality or mid quality in a lot of the classrooms. How can we fix that? Remember, language modeling is all about, and using the Hash software, we can engage in some frequent conversations by talking to children where they went, what they did, asking open-ended questions. What do you think will happen in this, digital experience? What do you think is important to learn letters? What a great question. Because we know that we need to memorize them, but why do you think it's important to learn letters? What else in the world do we see letters? What will happen after we learn how to put the letters together, or after we know the names of the sounds and things like that? We can engage in repetition and extension when they're telling us something, we can repeat what they just say, and we can expose them to more language. For example, if they say blue house, you can say, "Oh, are you pointing at the blue house that is on top of the shelf over there? Awesome, I like the blue house. You want me to grab it for you?" And that is repeating what they say, but at the same time, I expose them to more language by, using whole sentences. Self and parallel talk is describing what they're doing. If you sit next to a child and he is going to an adventure, for example, you can describe what she or he are doing. Oh, you're going with Lila, you're going here, you're going to meet Gas now, and awesome. And you can provide them, expose them to language. And advanced language refers to, when we are using complete sentences, we are describing words for them. We're not just incorporating sophisticated words, but we're explaining to them what that means, etc., so they can understand and they can, have a bigger vocabulary in their lives. So a very important language modeling is how the teachers are exposing children to language. And when we think about these digital experiences, what a great opportunity for you to talk to children about their experiences they're having, and also remember to be excited about, so they can be excited, because when we're excited, it's contagious. They're going to be excited and they're going to engage. They're going to tell you what they did and things like that. And you can help them. I don't want to cut it short, but I got a little bit nervous since we only had like 3 more minutes.
That's fine. And all of this is in the slides that everyone will receive. And I feel like you gave just a really good summary of what's on the next couple of slides. So I don't think anybody's going to miss anything. We just want to mention also that we have an alignment document that connects the class framework and Ignite, and talks about how Ignite really aligns with the information in the class framework. And that link will be provided in the chat that Kayla is going to put in the chat in a few moments for you. Just to kind of summarize where we've been today, we talked about the importance of community. We talked about ways to build positive community in the classroom, and a little bit about assessing that community classroom culture. And then Cristina gave us a really great overview of thinking critically about how we, with intention, can build positive classroom community while children are using digital tools. Like, talking about it. My first conversation with Maria Cristina planning for this webinar was like, oh, dang, I never thought about any of that. But it makes total sense to really intentionally think about how you're engaging, how you're talking, the questions that you ask, co-engagement, playing a game with them and modeling language while they're playing is such a way to elevate the educational experience of the games. And I so appreciate you sharing that with us, Maria Cristina. That was fantastic. We have an opportunity now for additional questions. If anybody has any questions they'd like to share in the chat box, feel free to do that now. We have a couple reference slides. You don't need to read those, but those will be available for you if you want more information about something we presented on today. And then there's my contact information if you have additional questions you want to ask at a separate time. I want to wholeheartedly thank Maria Cristina for being with us today and being our resident class expert. Thank you so much for walking us through that.
Thank you for having me. It was great. And I hope it was very helpful for everybody. And to all the teachers that we have, thank you for everything you do, because you're impacting children's lives every day. So please feel like superheroes. You might not wear a cape, but you are making a difference. So thank you for everything you do. And thank you for having me again. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much. We'll stay on for a moment if anybody has any questions. It is 4 o'clock on my clock, so feel free to log out if you don't have any questions. We hope you have a wonderful holiday season if you're celebrating holidays. If not, we hope that no matter what, you have the opportunity to connect with family and friends and your loved ones, to relax and rejuvenate a little bit and be ready to start the new year fresh